I played against Johnny Giles. I was also his manager at Leeds United in the 70s, and I would say he's arguably the most talented player to come out of the Republic of Ireland since the war. Two-footed, he won 60 caps, a real playmaker, a fierce competitor, but above all he was a real thinker on the game. He's been involved in football for over 40 years as a player, manager and now a journalist. One of the original Busby Babes, Giles today still has a passion for the game, particularly the technical side.
Well, it started mainly through my father. My father was a football man. He was manager from Drumcondra, which was a League of Ireland team. So I was brought up in a football household, and I played football from the time I can remember. Started very young, playing in underage football, under 14, which was the youngest we could play under. And my father ran a team then called the Leprechauns, which I played for. Then I went on to play for Stella Maris 1 year before I came to England.
So was your father a footballer as well?
Yeah, he played League of Ireland football, and I think he was a pretty good footballer at that level. He was a huge influence on me, Jimmy. Very good knowledge of the game, good knowledge of positional sense, where to get the ball, how to get into position to receive it, how to use it. You know, when I played matches, he came to most of the matches I played in, and he'd tell me afterwards what I should have done. Or, football fanatic, loved the game, huge influence on me as a player.
So, how come you got from Ireland to England, and really, I suppose, to one of the best spots in the country, to Manchester United?
Well, there was a man called Billy Bean who knew my father through football. He played for Manchester United, I think, before the war and that. He was a referee when my father played, so he knew him for a long, long time. And he was the scout for Manchester United. Because all the clubs, even in those days, had scouts, not as many as they have today. But Billy was a scout for Manchester United and had sent over quite a few players before he sent me over. So he used to come to the matches regularly. I didn't really need any encouragement to go to Manchester United because I followed Manchester United from a distance, mainly because Johnny Carey, who was a great Irish player, you know, captain Manchester United when they won the Cup in 1948. So I was a big Manchester United fan before I went to Old Trafford. Southern Ireland is a Catholic country, as you know, Jim, and Matt Busby was Catholic, Jimmy Armfield was a Catholic. I know it sounds strange now, but I think there was always a connection there. And Billy Bean, I think, knew Matt Busby very, very well, and he was scouting for him, I think, immediately after the war. So Manchester United were successful as well. At the time I was growing up, you know, in the 40s, late 40s particularly, in 48, 49, they had a terrific team with Jimmy Delaney, Morris, Rowley, Pearson, Mitten. So I think they caught the imagination of the public in those days, and they were a great side. And certainly Johnny Carey was a huge influence on that. So
come the big day, you have to leave home.
Yeah.
Was that a wrench?
Not for me, Jim. I'd been over to Manchester the year before for a month when I was 14, and I was coming away when I was 50. I wanted to go anyway. It was something I really wanted to do, and my father wanted me to go, but my mother wasn't too happy about it.
So the great adventure, I suppose that's what it was, to go to another country, all that distance at that age. Never thought about it being anything else?
No, I wasn't qualified to do anything else, Jim. I wasn't very good at school. I used to daydream in classes about football. I had nothing else to do. I didn't want to do anything else. I just wanted to be a footballer.
So when you got to Manchester United, you also came at the time of the Busby Babes.
Yes.
They grew up with me. Some of them were in the National Service with me.
Yeah.
What was your thoughts about them?
Well, it was a wonderland really for a young boy because pre-season training, the older lads are training with the younger lads, and there was Duncan Edwards and Tommy Taylor and Dennis Violet, David Pagan, all these great players. And they'd come up through the ranks as young boys themselves. And so there was a great atmosphere at the club in those days. There was very, very few players that they bought. But what I didn't realise, Jim, really, was the amount of talent there was at the club. You know, I knew about the older players, like the players I just mentioned, but the amount of talent...
It was actually quite frightening for the rest of us. I mean, see, we finished runners-up to Manchester United 1 year.
I remember that.
And the thing is, when I look back, they must have had at least 20, 25 top-class players.
Oh, yeah, because in those days, you know, every player had a position. The inside forwards, say, for example, at Old Trafford in those days, was Dennis Violet, Bobby Charlton, Jackie Blanchflower, Colin Webster. There was about 4 players for every position. You know, the halfbacks, Jeff Whitefoot, Eddie Coleman, Freddie Goodwin, Wilf McGuinness, Duncan Edwards, and only 2 could get in the team at any given time. It was absolutely incredible. The first year I went to Old Trafford, the first team played the second team. Bobby Charlton couldn't get a game in the reserves.
You must have thought, golly, I'm a long way down the ladder here.
Sure was, yeah. Well, the first year I was only 15. I played in the juniors, which was the 5th team. And even in those days, they'd have about 6 lads who were good players, couldn't even get into that team. And they were amateurs, you know.
I don't know if you ever played in the reserves. I mean, see, I once played in Blackpool's reserve team at Manchester United, and you can tell it was the days of Duncan Edwards in the United reserves. Yeah. And there was actually 27,000 on. Now, I've told people that, and they don't believe me. Will you verify that?
Oh, definitely. I played in the reserves when there was 20,000 or more. Because I think what happened to the Manchester United public, they knew what was happening, and they knew there was a lot of good young players coming to the club. And when they went to see the reserves, they were really watching top-notch players. The standard And the amount of players, there was about 40-odd pros in those days. So the amount of talent at the club, I mean, if it hadn't been for the Munich disaster, they'd dominated for, I don't know, any time. They were absolutely brilliant, you know.
Tell us about Munich.
Well, Munich was a very sad time. I think it affected everybody, Jim. We were training at the ground. I was playing in the youth team at the time, and we were in the afternoon of the Munich air disaster. We were back at the ground training with old Bill Inglis for a youth cup match. We were in the dressing room afterwards, and old Bill came in and said that the plane had crashed. But I must say, the way he said it, it didn't seem to be too bad. You know, it just seemed to be, well, it was a crash, but there was nobody killed in it or anything. But it was a very sad time, a very traumatic time around the club.
I mean, it affected all of us, really, in football at the time. And eventually, of course, you did make the breakthrough into the side, and initially it was on the wing, if I remember rightly.
Well, I made my debut actually at inside forward, Jim. It was 1959. We played Tottenham Hotspur, who were coming on to the best years. Dave Mackay just coming out from Scotland, Danny Blanchflower, Cliff Jones, all those great players, and we got a hiding 5-1 at Old Trafford. So I couldn't get back into the team again. He said Quicksall, Voyle, Charlton were the inside forwards. There was no way I could get into the team. So I used to have little spells out in the right wing, playing in the reserves just to show that I could do a bit there, and then Matt put me into the team on the right wing. It was the only way I could get into the team at that particular time, but I was always a natural inside forward. But I'd rather play on the wing in the first team than play inside forward in the reserves.
What do you think of Busby?
Well, I think Matt Busby was one of the great football men of all times. His patience was great, Jim. You know, if we lost 3 or 4-0, he'd never come in and blow his top.
He was a good loser, wasn't he?
He was great at that. I mean, the patience he had. I mean, it might sound very simple to people listening to say, well, everybody should be patient. But in football, as you know, it's a very emotional game. The managers blow up when they lose a match. But Matt never did, and he believed in players. You know, he was getting the best players as young players into the side, and he had the courage to put them in to create the Busby Babes. And he'd let them play. He just believed in great players. I mean, technically, looking back on it, he wasn't great. If things went wrong, to come out on the training pitch on a Monday and put it right. But he just believed, well, next week will be different and we'll go again next week. But no fear from the players. He believed in good players, having good players in the club and allowing them to play.
Anyway, was it Matt that sold you to Leeds?
Matt sold me to Leeds, yeah. I wanted to go at the time, Jim. I'd had a bad year with Matt, all that 62-63 season. I played in the Cup semi-final against Tottenham Hotspur in 1962, and we were beaten 3-1, and I had an absolute nightmare in the match. I was playing inside forward then. And I think Matt lost confidence in me and Jimmy Murphy and the staff because I'd played in a big match and I hadn't done it. And they signed Dennis Law in the summer, and I played on the right wing then the following season. And I couldn't do right for doing wrong with Matt. Everything I did was wrong, and really I had a very, very unhappy year. Although I played in the cup final against Leicester in '63. But I only played one more match. I played a Charity Shield against Everton, and we got beaten 4-0, and I was straight out of the team again. It was time to move. Matt wasn't unhappy about it. He agreed to the transfer request straight away. And I wanted to go because I couldn't see any future for myself there.
Well, 35,000 I think is probably some of the best money that Leeds has spent. Don Revie was sort of building a team at that time, wasn't he?
Yeah, well, most of the players were there. Billy Bremner, Norman Hunter, Paul Reaney, Paul Medley was coming onto the team, Terry Cooper was coming into the team. They were all there when I got there. And I was only 22 myself, and they were younger than me. So Don was building the team. He had Bobby Collins there, who was great. Bobby was a great player and a great influence and a great drive and a great example to the young players. Even after Bobby left, that example stayed.
Well, he was a tough guy, wasn't he?
He was.
And you were a tough guy as well. Did you sort of take him as a sort of...
Well, I think it was the climate of the times, Jim. You know, I played Manchester United, had my leg broken at Birmingham. And I think during the 60s, it was a very, very tough game.
It was.
And there was a lot of physical stuff, and I was regarded as a skillful player. And when you're a skillful player, you're a target. And my attitude was, well, if I'm going to make a living in this game and I want to make it, then I'm going to have to be as tough as everybody else. And I set out to do that. But Bobby was a tough character and a terrific player.
The game was different in the respect that you didn't get many bookings. It's a different attitude altogether, isn't it now?
Well, I think you have to have a different attitude today. I think there was much more license to be naughty in those days. I mean, you had to commit grievous bodily harm to be sent off. You know, the defenders could whack a centre forward early on and get a little ticking off for it, and if you did it again, you might get booked or you might not get booked. So it's a different game in that respect. There was a lot more license to do certain things, and you know, I think the game is better for it today because it allows players to play, and you don't have the bad stuff that went on in the 60s. But again, from my own point of view, if I was going to make a living in the game, well, that's the way it was, and I had to accept it.
Now, this partnership with Billy Bremner became legendary, I suppose is the right word. You know, all the rest of us looked on it as one of the best partnerships in the English game. What do you think was the reason, really, for it taking off? You were total opposites, really.
Well, I think that was one of the reasons, Jim, that we got on so well. Billy was a very bubbly character, as you know, on the pitch, very, very cocky, very confident lad, always doing the unexpected. You know, Billy could cut the ball across his body at times when I thought maybe he could play it simple. I was probably the boring one that would be more orthodox than Billy, but it was a combination that worked really well. And around the middle of the field, Billy was very, very clever as well. Like between us, we knew what we were going to do when somebody else had a ball. You know, and football, as you know, it's the spontaneous things that make it good. The things that we did, you can't practice because it happens in the spur of the moment. It happens on the pitch, and you have to react to it very, very quickly. And I think that's what makes good players. And Billy would know if I was on the ball and I was going to do something, he knew before I did it, and I knew what he was going to do before he did it. So in that respect, you know, we got on well. And Billy was a great player because he was very competitive. He was bubbly, scored vital goals. He could tackle, he could do all those things, but he was a very, very confident lad. But on the pitch, we got on well.
Looking at that team, I've told people over the years, apart from the Busby Babes, I would think that set of players he had at Leeds that played together for over a decade, he's probably as good a set that's played together for any length of time that we've had in the English game in my time. And yet, you didn't win that many prizes in terms, you did win prizes, but you didn't win that many. I mean, see, and I can remember losing to Sunderland in the FA Cup, throwing 2 championships away. When I was there, we lost in the European Cup final. Why do you think it was?
Well, I think it's all relative, Jim. You know, we were successful over a long period of time. Like Manchester City had a great team, and they did all their stuff in about 3 seasons. You know, they won the league, then they won the cup, they won the League Cup and the Cup Winners' Cup. So they did it in about 3 seasons. We were winning our trophies over a period of 10 years. And it was also because we were there every year. You know, if you're not in the cup final, you're not going to lose it. And if you're not going to win the championship, you're runners-up, in which we were. And we had a certain amount of bad luck as well. I mean, the first year we were in the first division, we lost to Manchester United. And we were the first team ever in the Football League to get 60 points or more and not win the championship. Another year we finished runners-up to Arsenal with 64 points. And they used to say in those days, if you win your home matches, draw your away matches, 63 points, you should win the championship. We had 64 points. Didn't win it.
One of the lads once said to me, one of the players who were there with you, I remember him saying, and I can't remember which one it was, said he always felt that Don put pressure on you. He felt as though he was pressurising you all the time. Yeah. And if he'd have relaxed them a little bit more, they might have done better.
Well, I think there's a lot of truth in that. You see, I think when Don took over Leeds, it was in a non-football area. He was building a team from scratch. And what made the team great, I think, with Don was his attention to detail, putting things right. You lost the goal, he'd be out on the Monday, how it went wrong, why it went wrong, who was at fault, don't let it happen again. And it made us a very, very consistent team. And I think what happened at Leeds, my theory is that the team actually got older and better without Don recognising it. And I think he always had this attention to detail and a cautiousness about him that didn't actually see the team being as good as they were.
I think when I arrived, I think I actually felt that. I felt to myself, well, what's this team doing at the bottom of the first division? All this talent, you know, what's it all about? So you could probably be right.
I think that's what it was. And you see, the best spell we had at Leeds, we played from Christmas 71 to the end of season 72, some of the best football that I've ever seen anywhere. And I think that was mainly due to, going up to Christmas 71, we weren't in the running for the championship. We were 8th and 9th in the league. And Don said, right, we'll concentrate on the cup and just go out and play. And we hit a form that was unbelievable. Actually, we needed to draw at Wolverhampton to win the double. We went on to win the cup. But we actually came from nowhere in the Champions. And I think that was it. And I did see him before he died, and I went to see him. Yeah. And he did say that, like, he didn't see the team get older and better. He said he only realised how good the Leeds lads were when he went with the England team. And it does happen because you're so close to the players. But there again, you know, it's easy to be critical in certain ways, but the players wouldn't have got to the pitch that they were at without Don's knowledge and attention to detail in the first place.
I mean, there's no doubt the Revie era was the best era that Leeds have ever had. You know, 2 league championships, FA Cup. We should have won the European Cup, you know, which is probably one of the biggest disappointments I've ever had. And funny enough, I was more disappointed for the players. It seems a bit odd to say that.
Yeah.
But I was, because I realised what it probably meant to them.
Well, it was an end of an era. You know, we were all coming towards the end of our days, you know, in 75 when we got the European Cup final. But what was great about the Leeds lads, Jim, was that all managers and footballers in the game say, you know, you want consistency. And you couldn't have got more consistency from those players year in, year out. Say Manchester City won the league in 68. They went in a run in 69. No. You know what I mean? We won the league in 69, but we're always in the run, and I think we finished runners-up 5 times in 10 years, winning it twice, never out of the top 4. And we were in 10 cup finals, different cup finals over a period of 10 years. So I think we should have won more than we did, but it wasn't for lack of effort and attitude week in and week out. And they were a great bunch of lads and a great bunch of players.
I must ask you, this sandwich between Don Revie and myself, of course, just for a month or two, was Brian Clough.
Yeah.
Why do you think it worked for Brian there?
Well, you know, I think the perception is that, and certainly from Brian Clough himself, that the player power got rid of him. But I wouldn't agree with that. I think Brian Clough's attitude when he came into the club was all wrong. One of the first meetings he had with the players, he said, you know, as far as I'm concerned, you get all your medals and throw them in a bin. over there. That was one of the first words he said to us. He never gave us a chance. I think if he'd said to the players, look, I'll give you 3 months, I want to see how you go, I think he'd still be at Leeds today if he wanted to be. Because we just won the league championship in 74.
That's right.
I don't think he ever got the players, really got them. I think he upset the players more than getting them to play for him, because after that meeting, we thought, what's going on here? This is stupid stuff, you know? Because he had been critical of Leeds when he was manager of Derby.
Do you think it was an odd choice for Leeds?
Yeah, I think it was a bad choice at the time. I mean, Brian Clough was a great manager, did a great job at Derby, and he did a great job at Notts Forest. But he never got off first base with the Leeds lads to produce the magic that he produced in other clubs. And he never got the players.
So what did it feel like when the time come for you to actually leave Leeds? I mean, so I remember you saying you wanted to go and have a go at management.
Well, it was strange. I was 34 when I left Leeds, Jim, and I think it was time to move at that particular stage. We got to the European Cup final in 75, but we weren't in the run for the league. We made a very bad start. So I intended to go into management anyway, and I think the time was right to do it at that particular time.
It was quite a decent move for you to the Albion as well, to West Bromwich.
Yeah, it was a great move. I didn't really fancy leaving Leeds because I was 12 years in the place and kids were going to school and that. So it was a big move to go to Birmingham. But from the first day I went to Birmingham, people were great. And the club was terrific, good local club, West Bromwich.
You got promotion first year, didn't you?
We got promotion the first year, yeah. And there were a good set of lads, great set of lads. And the supporters were great. It was good club.
But I think you once said being a manager of a club also required a health warning with it, you know.
Well, I think it applies today, you know, any manager of the club. I think management was a very, very difficult job. I didn't really enjoy it. I thought the attitude of directors to managers wasn't good. The playing side, the players had got on great, but there were restrictions, I felt, from the board side. Also the attitude of directors generally to managers.
Nevertheless, you went on, you had a spell with, was it Shamrock and then Vancouver, Whitecaps, didn't you?
Yeah, well, what I did was I felt when I was at West Brom, 2 years at West Brom, and I felt that the only way to do the job properly in a club was to own a club. And I had a brother-in-law who was involved with Shamrock Rovers, and I was given an option of 50% ownership of Shamrock Rovers. So I thought I'd rather go and do something in Ireland, or try and do something in Ireland, and be really in charge of my own destiny, and that's the reason I did that.
Did it work?
No.
Why?
I think the idea was right, because it was League of Ireland, it was part-time, and we were the only full-time club. I wanted to get young players to stop and come back to England, bring up a few players, which takes time, as you know. But the environment wasn't right. We were doing it in isolation. There was nobody else doing it. Conditions in the League of Ireland at that time, I don't know what it's like now, weren't good. When you go out to away pitches, they weren't good. So there was nobody going along with what we were trying to do. We produced a few players. Jim Beglin played for us and a few other players. We did okay, but it never worked out as well as I...
Just while you're on that, do you think football could ever take off in Southern Ireland? Surely there's room for a club in Dublin.
Well, let's talk about Wimbledon going to Dublin. I think Wimbledon would do really well in Dublin. I think there's a ready-made audience for that type of football, and there's objections to it because they have what's now the National League, which was the League of Ireland, which is local clubs. But the League of Ireland will always be limited in what they can attract and what they can do. But I think if they had a Premiership club there, it would do really well.
So why did you go to Vancouver?
Well, I was at Shamrock Rovers for a few seasons, and Tony Waiters, who was an old pal of yours, was in Vancouver, and he approached me to go. I was able to go in the summertime, you see, because the seasons, they overlapped a little bit, but not too much. I wanted to work also with better players, and North America was good. The league was very good, very well run, and with some good players. And I really enjoyed it.
Well, coming back to Ireland, you won 60 caps. It was a very long international career, really. But the Irish team never really took off. Yet they had very good players.
We always had a certain amount of good players, Jim, but we never had the strength and depth that was needed to do it. I mean, at my time, well, certainly in the later years, we had Liam Brady, David O'Leary, and Frank Stapleton came on. I was getting on a bit then, but we didn't have the real strength and depth until they changed the qualification rule when Jack was in charge, and we got the likes of Ray Houghton and Andy Townsend, John Aldridge, and people like that, a lot of good players, to give us the strength to do it. We always had, like Northern Ireland in their day, they Dugan and Best and a few others, but we didn't have the real strength to do it.
You had a belt at player manager of Ireland, didn't you?
Well, I was player manager most of the time, Jim. I was player manager in Ireland, I think in 73 to 79, so I played quite a few matches. It was okay. I quite enjoyed it. Obviously, you can't do all the things that you would want to do because I was still player manager of West Brom as well. So you can't go looking at players and doing all the things that managers would do on a full-time basis. But we didn't have that many players anyway, so we had to get together every so often, and we went very close to qualifying a couple of times. But we'd never looked like qualifying before that, you know.
No, because Big Jack did well with them, didn't he? I mean, you had him as a colleague at Leeds United. It seemed a peculiar marriage, really, I would have thought at first, but in the end, it was obviously anything but.
I think it suited Jack, and when Jack came into the job, you see that the qualification rule changed. Jack did extremely well, but he had some great players. I mean, if you look back at the players that Jack had, you know, centre-half, David O'Leary, Kevin Moran, Mick McCarthy, Paul McGrath, Chris Hughton, you know, Townsend Keane, Brady, Sheedy, Houghton, Aldridge, Stapleton, nearly all together at the same time. I mean, I think Ireland had a better collection of players actually than England had at that time. Well, in this small country, it had to go at some stage. But at that particular time, we were very lucky. We got a lot of terrific players together at the same time.
What do you do with yourself now?
Well, I do quite a bit of work for Irish television. We've just started our own Match of the Day, which we call the Premiership. We do the Champions League and the European Cup matches, and I do a bit of work for Daily Express. So I see a lot of football. It's all on the media side, Jim, so it gives me a bit of time to play a bit of golf.
If you weren't working on the media side, would you pay to go and watch football today?
No, I'm not a great watcher of football, Jim. I wouldn't go to a lot of matches, to be quite honest. I might watch it on the television. But I think if I wasn't doing it, I would probably be playing golf on Saturday afternoon.
Do you think we've got a chance of getting good teams in Europe again, getting right to the top?
Well, you know, there's been a big change in the game recently. We've got a lot of foreign players. I think if Chelsea qualified for the Champions League next year, they'd do well. Arsenal, I think, with a full team, because the squad is a little bit weak and they had some injuries, would have done extremely well. We've got Manchester United, of course, who have the resources to do it. I think they should do reasonably well. You know, it's a question of playing week in and week out. I think there are too many weak teams in the Premiership, to be quite honest.
Don't you think the Premiership's, say, as competitive as it was, say, in the 70s? Or?
I think it's as competitive. I don't think there are as many good players, to be quite honest. When you look at the league now, you can tell before the league starts, people talk about 3 or 4 teams can win the league. And I think in your day, in my day, I know in 97, 1968, 69, 70, 71, 72, 73, 74, 75, different teams won the league.
Who's your favourite player today, John?
I think Vieira is a terrific player when he keeps his head and keeps his discipline. I think he's the best midfield player.
He can look after himself as well. He's a strong lad.
He's a good player, but the things he gets into trouble for, Jim, I think it's very avoidable. I don't think there's any need for him to get involved in some of the things that he gets involved in. And it's not because he's tackling hard. I think it's just silly stuff. But I think he's a very good player. I think he's always a good player. Shearer when he's at his best, very good. Michael Owen, Robbie Fowler when he's at his best. Giggs.
Do you wish you were playing now, John?
Well, I'm funny if I have no regrets about not playing, Jim. I think you get older, you have your time. I really enjoyed. I loved it when I did it. And, you know, I came over to England. I had ambitions to play in the big games and on the big pitches and that. And I'm very lucky, very privileged that I did most of the things that I wanted to do. So you have your time in the game, and the players who are playing today, good luck to them.